Here we go. Uh, Hello, everybody. I'm going to be a little fiddly here for a moment. My name is Seven Song, and I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to have a class tonight on what it's like to be an herbalist working at a free clinic. So there's a lot of notes. So this is a warning for everybody who's on time, that as I put this class together over the past couple of weeks, it's been hard to slot specific kinds of information into each other. And so so sometimes there'll be repetition of ideas, but I think even more than that is I realize that this is really multiple different kinds of classes, and that's going to be the difficulty with this class. So for instance, talking about counseling, right? So a big part of being an herbalist or being a practitioner anywhere but in a free clinic is one's counseling skills, and counseling skills itself would easily be a 2-hour class. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by going over, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the information in an order that basically has to do with the clinic, myself at the clinic, patients at the clinic, and then treatments. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to rush the information. So if I'm not covering it, I will just do another class. So that's the goal. So I feel like that way there's a lot of time because it's way more than 2 hours worth. And as a student myself, I would rather have the information more thorough. So that's one part. Next part is all the Marlows are there. So if you want to write in your chat box, hello, all the Marlows, Marlows. Michelle Marlowe has been the tech help that's been fantastic, and her family's there tonight. So I just thought everybody can just chat out, instead of shout out, chat out a hello to everybody there. And thank you. So the other problem or the other difficulty is I'm assuming the people who are listening right now, you come from various places of being an herbalist or working in clinics. And so like it was hard for me. So I started asking around, like, so what is the most pertinent information to give? And I don't think I have an answer, because some of you might be beginner herbalists wondering what it's like to be an herbalist in a clinic, and maybe you'd be more interested in the herbs. Some of you might be established herbalists working in clinics, maybe thinking about moving to a free clinic. Some of you may work in free clinics. So it's a plethora of different, of different places where you are in your life as a health professional. So I'm just going to go through it the way that I started, that I have the class. The reason I'm saying all this is because I talk a lot. And also that you might find that some of the information might not be so pertinent to you. One thing to do, of course, is to just wait and skip through it in a recording, or listen and see if I get the information that seems more important to you in where you are in your life right now as a herbalist or healthcare practitioner. So that's my prelude. So I want to talk about some of the goals of this class. This might be the goals of a couple of classes. And so glasses on. My notes are on the left of me, so I'll be looking there a lot. So one of the main goals of this class is to give people a practical impression of what it's like to be an herbalist at a free clinic. So I'm going to give lots of details, but I've been working in a free clinic in Ithaca, New York for 14 years now. And so I only work 4 hours a week generally, but I was also one of the founding people, and I've been there consistently. So I've seen thousands of people, and I put in hundreds of hours at the clinic. And so while I tend to plod on, I just want, one of it is like very specific details of what it's like for me to work there. And definitely what it's like for me as somebody who's never worked in a clinic situation, and to then be working in a much more stoic or a much more conventional free clinic. We're not the most conventional, but I think you're getting the idea. Basically, I'm just always somebody who practiced outside of any kind of office mostly, and then put in an office with a lot of people, and I adore it. If it doesn't come throughout the class, I'm telling you right now, I am so clinic proud. I am so glad to have been one of the many people who helped found it. I am so glad to have worked there. My skills have gone up exponentially. I think I've worked with a lot of people. I've talked with a lot of practitioners. So that's why I like talking about it. For me, it's been exceptional. So then also some of the specific things that I'll try to cover will be very practical things like acquiring donations, the equipment that you might need, skills that are important. I want to go over some of the ways that maybe other people can start clinics. There's many ways, there's different kinds of clinics. So I want to just make sure to point out that another very different clinic that's extremely well organized and very useful. There's a few of them. I'm going to just mention two right now. So there's the Herbalista Clinic, run by Lorna Mounty Broddock. But if you just type herbalista.org, you'll get there, in Atlanta, Georgia. And Lorna's real specialty, Lorna has lots of specialties, but one of them is setting up pop-up clinics for homeless people in Atlanta, and she's been doing it for years. If you go to herbalista.org, there's lots of resources. They ask for donations. That would be great if you wanted to help out with them. They run on a shoestring budget, and like so many other clinics, a lot of us are the ones that basically support it. Another clinic that's is similar to ours, it's slightly mobile, but also works with medical people, and that would be Occupy Eugene. Occupy Eugene. If you type that in, you should get there, and that's run by Sue Sierra Lupe. So I'm just gonna, Michelle's been trying to get me to say this for years, not maybe really years, I'm making that part up, but a long time. So I'm gonna say it. If you're interested in donating to the Ithaca Free Clinic, this is a class, I'm not asking straight out, but I do take donations right now. The thing that I need the most are French presses. We'll talk about them because I give them to my patients. So it doesn't have to be money, but I just want, if this appeals to you and you have fluid cash or however, you're welcome to donate to the Ithaca Free Clinic. That's all the details for now. But please, of course, just listen to this and feel free not to. So some of the more details and goals of this class is how herbalists can work well with other kinds of practitioners. And so other kinds of practitioners means very different, like a medical doctor, which is somewhat different, nurses, Reiki practitioners. So I want to talk about what it's like to work with other practitioners. For me, I often work with the more medical side. I'm pretty medical oriented, frankly. And so that's a part of it. Sometimes I think the harder thing is working with people like ourselves. Like it's so much easier to compare and to see what I like and don't like with other herbalists, right? Because that's my skill set. It's just like as a botanist, I listen to other botanists and I have a much better idea of where their skills are. So that would also be important. There have been other herbalists. Most of them have been former students of mine who do work at the clinic and currently work at the clinic. And it would be a shout out to Cal Janae, who's been working there for years now, and they've been doing an excellent job. So I think that's enough of kind of the goals, and there's many of them. There's 46 pages of notes in front of me. So I just want to go over a little bit of bio of who I am and just stick my face in the camera, woo, and then move back again, whoa, and then kind of somewhere in the middle. So my name is Seven Song. That is the name I go by. That's my name is what I'm saying. Because people sometimes will write and say, what is your other name? And this is my name. I'm a Russian Jew, so that's my ethnicity. I'm originally from Long Island, New York. That's my accent. I've been living in Ithaca, New York for over 30 years. I mean, Ithaca, New York is my home. I mean, I still have family on Long Island, but Ithaca has definitely been my home for a long time now. One of my specialties besides working the clinic, or really my more specialties, I do first aid at many events, things like rainbow gatherings and sometimes music events, and work in first aid stations, often with medical people as well. So one of my strengths is acute care, bleeding, diarrhea, sprained ankles. They can be pretty serious. Bad case of asthma, exacerbations of pre-existing conditions, that kind of thing. A really important part of my life is social activism. And so I'm very glad to see that it seems to be becoming more and more of a part of people's lives. Some I appreciate more than others. If you're in the US and listening to this, please vote in November. Please try to get rid of, Donald Trump scares me. It's just going to be straightforward with that. So I would rather not have a misogynistic, homophobic president in the United States. If that bothers you, then I'm not going to say too much more about it, but I'm just going to be really straightforward. I think voting right now is, I mean, I remember Richard Nixon. Like, I have a long line of people that have not been my favorite presidents, but right now I think it's more crucial than ever, especially if you're in a swing state. Please vote in November. Let's see. Otherwise, I'm also a botanist. I'm a self-taught botanist, not a university-trained botanist, and I'm a naturalist. A lot of my time is spent looking at insects and plants and just really anything that moves. So more to the point about the clinic. So the Ithaca Free Clinic started up somewhere, I think, in late 2004. And I came on board sometime in 2005 before it was open. So I was in the clinic for about a year. And so I'm one of there are many founding members. It is absolutely not my clinic. In no way is this my clinic. If I left, there would be one herbalist short, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But I mean, the clinic fully exists. But I have been a big part of it. I am like the last person standing who's been there the whole time. I'll talk more about why it's so important to me in a bit. So I got involved when we were founding the clinic. My goal was always trying to figure out the clinical side of things and the herbalism side of things and what we came to call the holistic side of things. So if people, I'll look at questions later, but questions about, you know, how we worked with the local hospital, how we acquired all our financing, how people found the space to rent, those have never been in my purview. My purview is always much more in clinical. I know some because I go to other meetings and I have interest, but you know, if you've ever been a part of an organization starting, there's a lot of meetings and there's committees and subcommittees and junior subcommittees. And so there's a point of burnout, but a lot of the people stayed. So this brings me to something that I want to start off by saying, because if you want to start a free clinic, for me, having been a part of an organization that successfully started and has been going even through COVID, one of our hardest times, to currently, is I just want to say that I find that there are two important aspects of getting together with people. So I'm going to cover more of this in detail, but I'm just going to start off by saying, having been trying to be a part of numerous kinds of organizations and being somebody who travels around the country teaching about starting free clinics, there are two things that I find that really help for this. So the first is the people who are organizing it are anchored in the community. So we had about 18 people in our committees. Excuse me. And a lot of them lived in Ithaca for a long period of time. So this is going to sound ageist, but frankly, a lot of the people were older and had like settled in. So this is why I'm saying this, and you can be any age and do this, but my experience is working with other groups of people trying to start something is a lot of young, meaning people in the 20s and 30s who are very excited and have a lot of energy for it. But often they leave in a couple of years or just a year or two. It takes years to get steady. So if you're starting a free clinic or any organization, I would say, but let's go with the free clinic, knowing that a majority of the people that you're working with, at least some amount of people live there and will be committed throughout the process. There's no guarantee that that will happen, but that by far more than almost anything else, excuse me, Ken, what I found to be one of the most important parts. The next is compromise. And this is going to go along with mission statement. So another thing that I've seen impede groups of people from getting clinics together has been divisiveness about the mission statement of what you want and what you don't want. So I'm going to explain this in some detail because to me it's very important. So as an herbalist, amongst many conventional medical practitioners and many administrators to the hospital, not really administrators, there were administrators, people who worked in our local hospital, some of my ideas were very different than some of their ideas about what the clinic should have, and should not have. But we all had one goal, And we succeeded in that goal. And so everything else took a very far second step from that initial goal. And that goal was to serve people around Ithaca, New York for free. That was the goal. So many of us had different politics. For me, of course, I wanted it to be a place where everybody feels safe, but everybody there wanted it to be a place that people felt safe to. That was easy. But I mean, so sometimes the politics come in and how are we going to run this and who? So there were problems, and I hope that the Ithaca Free Clinic is a place where every community member, every person, doesn't have to be a community member, feels safe and well supported to come there. That's a priority. But the overlying priority is we treat people for free. So those are the two things. And so it just takes a lot of compromise all down the line. Like, somebody would bring an idea at a meeting, and then, so we never did it. We never did that kind of collective thing. It didn't, if one person dissented, we would listen to them if they had a strong dissent, and then we would make a decision. And that, if I was that person, I would just think, yeah, it's more important, to not have a consensus and to get the clinic going. But again, most of us were fairly like-minded, so it wasn't a lot of battling that way. So those are really, out of all the things, the two most important things. And as I said, I'm almost the only person left from the original group would fit into this. So, so next, I want to give a story because I think it's funny and I think it illuminates a little bit. So many years ago, I was in our co-op. I was in our food co-op, the Green Star Food Co-op in Ithaca, New York. And I was in the tincture section, which I sell tinctures in the tincture section. And there were two people there talking about healthcare. And somebody said that I knew something about tinctures. And so the woman approached me and asked me, she asked me my opinion about her friend who was there. I'm sorry, I know I make little laughs. I have like an ironic laugh that comes out of me very frequently. So I hope it never seems to be against anything. It's just like I bubble up thinking how weird it is to be alive and the things that are coming out of my mouth. Moving forward. So I was in the Green Star Co-op, and this woman came over to me and asked me about treating her friend for cancer. So I discussed what I thought about that. I think as an herbalist, so my skill set as an herbalist, there are herbalists that are way more skilled, with treating cancer. I'm not one of them. What I'm skilled at, or at least hope to be skilled at, is treating people, support people with cancer. So I have a number of patients with cancer. I don't directly treat their cancers, but first of all, they're just human beings with a life, right? Whether it's stress or muscle pain or whatever, it's just like normal things that everybody has. Now you have cancer, so that's going to affect you. And often then anxiety, insomnia, pain, recovering from the chemotherapies or surgeries. So my goal as an herbalist is to provide support. So I told her that. A couple of months later, we got a letter. So I'm going to read the letter, and then I'm going to explain the letter. So excuse me while I read this out loud. It's not very long. Thank you for your recent letter. This is the people who wrote to the free clinic. Enclosed is our check for $10,000 to the free clinic. You may use these funds for administrative overhead or any other need. In response to your question about restricting the funds to conventional medicine, we would like to include the herbal medicine program overseen by Seven Song. So a little bit of history is I had no idea, but that woman who I talked to was $10,000 is great for us. Like, we're not that big an organization. $10,000 is really helpful. So she gave money to the clinic very generously, but she didn't trust herbalists. She didn't trust non-conventional medical care, which is so fine. I mean, if you have no experience with it, it's hard to trust. I mean, if you go online and look up herbal medicine, there's a lot of weird things out there. So it was interesting, like just being honest with her and just saying, this is my approach, just made her feel comfortable. So the next time she sent money, she said it was also available for the less conventional, which she said herbal services seen by me, but there's other folks there as well. So let me get a couple of words out of the way that I think are important. Let me find those words. And they're kind of gone. All right. Excuse me a moment. So these are words that I will be using throughout today's talk and future talks about this subject. And I just want to give you a good sense of what they are. So these are the way I use these words. So these are the words holistic, natural, conventional, and allopathic, right? So I'm going to start with these terminologies. So one of the things I had to do is I became the director of the non-medical people, but that didn't sound quite like a great way to say it. So eventually I just called myself the director of holistic medicine. That's my title at the free clinic. I don't use it very much, but that's my title. But I wanted to describe the terminology. So I call the doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, and that group of people, meaning Western University trained generally, I say conventional. Some people use the word allopathic. I don't care for the word allopathic. First, it doesn't mean much to many people. Also, I think it's a little pejorative, a little bit negative. So I just use conventional. And then I use holistic for the herbalists, acupuncturists, massage therapists, Reiki practitioners, yoga folks there, etc. But I want to spend another moment in here because I think it's important. That's actually not a very good way to do this because holistic, when you work in a free clinic, holistic does not mean non-conventional, because that's really what I'm the director of less conventional people, or more specifically, I'm the director of not them. So I want to point out, though, I feel like the word holistic is bastardized and not used very well. The word holistic means taking a whole patient in perspective. That doesn't mean what you give them is important. It means how you treat them is important. Do you give them agency? Do you help them find food or shelter? Are you listening to other parts of their needs? That is holistic, right? And I would say some of the doctors I work with are very holistic. They give pharmaceuticals, or at least prescriptions for them. But and then I know herbalists that I would say are less holistic, right? Somebody says I have a headache and you give them an herb, but that's not holistic, right? What's the root of the headache, or what else is going on that might be causing a headache? So I just want to get these words out of the way. And then there's one more group of words that I really find annoying. So I'm sorry to be petty and so personal here. And it's the words natural and unnatural, right? So the idea that I practice natural medicine because it's herbs, I find that it's unuseful in any way at all. I find that, again, it causes separation. I'm a healthcare practitioner who uses plants as my primary substance in helping treat people, as well as counseling and the other things that all of us do. So I really want to move away from terms like natural medicine and holistic medicine, unless it's really holistic, meaning you're taking a whole picture of the patient into consideration. So next is, what is a free clinic? So first, let's describe, so free clinics come in many different types. I once went to a clinic conference, and I'm going to quote the person, so I'm going to quote them without looking at it, and they said something like, when you've seen one free clinic, you've seen one free clinic. And I have to say, that's pretty true. I have visited numerous free clinics. We are very different in how we approach administration, getting donations. So free clinics are often very different, and they run the gamut. So some hospitals, like the Cleveland Hospital, one of the Cleveland hospitals in Cleveland, Ohio, they run a free clinic out of the hospital. So that's a very big, extremely well-funded free clinic. So you have things like Bellevue Hospital in New York. I mean, it's not a free clinic, but they treat a lot of people for free. And then you have myself, or not myself, the Ithaca Free Clinic, which is small, but not tiny. And then you have people who are just working like 1 week in an office and having people go there. So free clinics run the gamut. The Ithaca Free Clinic, the one that I'm a part of, all of our services are free. So consultations are free. We don't have many free labs, meaning lab tests. And so we have to, because we don't have a phlebotomist and a lab accessible at our site, at the clinic. So let's say I'm seeing somebody and I think their thyroid levels should get checked. We'll talk more about this, but I would get the doctor to come in. The doctor can write the recommendation. In New York State, you need a recommendation. You need kind of a prescription to go get your thyroid levels checked. But then they would have to go, to a hospital or to an outside source to get their blood drawn and then shipped and to get their results. We can read the results. I mean, the doctors could read the results. I can read some of these results, but they have to get that elsewhere. Also, we have very few pharmaceuticals. One thing I learned pretty quickly is sales reps don't come to free clinics. When I visit other friends, like and this is going to sound pretty terrible, but I'm almost jealous. Like people want to take them out to lunch and take them out to dinner and buy them fancy stuff. And that doesn't happen in the free clinic. We get some every once in a while. We have on date prescription medications, and then we can give the doctors, of course, not me, I can give those. Back to talking about the herbalist. So I want to, sorry, a little digression here. I mean, I think everything I say basically is digression. What I want to say is, I think modern pharmaceutical drugs are amazing. I think many surgical treatments and many options are amazing. Nobody's telling me to say this. I have just many of my patients and friends' lives have been saved by modern medicine and by modern surgical techniques. Absolutely. So we have to divorce that, though, from the USA's medical system, which is horrible. For a wealthy country, we have a despicably horrible healthcare system. I've never met you, I don't know who would argue that, maybe a politician, certainly not the doctors I work with. So I just want to make sure I separate talking to you that while I'm an herbalist and giving plants for medicine is my skill, I am very glad to be working alongside with people who have other forms of treatment, including things like acupuncture, body massage therapy, and pharmaceutical drugs, and lab tests, and maybe other kinds of treatments. So back to what I was talking about. So all the things that we give away as herbalists are free as well. So we give lots and lots of medicines away, when the person comes, and then we give them refills. We don't send medicines. It's where I kind of draw the line because it would just be too expensive. It's just a lot of work. So the main way that we support that is basically I spend the money. I spend a lot of money, mostly on alcohol. I mean, I'm not sure what the alcohol people think of me because I spend a lot there, but I order it online. I mean, it's much cheaper to buy alcohol in the mail than it is at a liquor store. So I personally am the primary support for the Ithaca Free Clinic giving away herbal medicines. As somebody pointed out just a moment ago, I can gather some of the plants, but when you start to see more people, it gets very difficult. How much hawthorn flower can I gather? How much, some things like elecampane root, that's so weedy around me right now. I can gather elecampane root, Inula helenium, enough until the plant stops living around here. But other plants, first, I use a lot of cinnamon. So cinnamon is a plant I use for blood sugar regulation. And when I say cinnamon, I mean cinnamon. I mean the stuff that comes in stick form and powder form. And so I have to buy that or get that. Sometimes I get money. I'll talk more about donations, but I'm going to keep going here. Sometimes I get some financial help. And then I just have to say it. Mountain Rose Herbs has been, and Mason Hutchinson at Mountain Rose Herbs, but that organization has been so helpful for me, sending me free stuff. So I really appreciate everybody who's given every donation. And I also just want to put out a big shout out for that company because they've been really, I feel really fortunate to be supported by them because it's really expensive to give people herbs all the time. And also, about gathering the plants, so I can still gather. I'm in my early 60s, but I'm not in my early 30s. And so, my pace has slowed down. Not my talking has sped up, but my pace of being able to dig like big ceanothus roots out of the ground, I still do it, but it's definitely getting harder. So what I just went over though is kind of what our free clinic is, what free clinics are. And a very touching on donations and how we work. To point out, just to describe the staff a little bit, the staff is divided. We can divide the staff into paid staff and unpaid volunteers. So we now have 4 paid staff people. We have an executive director. We have a clinic coordinator. That's basically my boss. We have an outreach coordinator and a chronic care coordinator. I'll talk about some of those things. And so, and then everybody else is a volunteer. So all medical people are volunteers, people doing reception, discharge, the nurses who take people's vitals when they come in, everybody else is a volunteer. So we have 4 paid staff. I want to also say, like before I said the things that really make our clinic work, it did work a lot better once we were able to afford people, because then, you know, it's just most people need money. And so, you know, you try to find somebody being a good executive director and they're out there, but, you know, they have lives and it's a full-time job. And so it really helped. Once we're able to help people with salaries, that helped. Salaries are our number 1 expense. Rent is our second expense, second largest expense. So I talked a little bit about my early involvement. So when I came to the clinic in 2005, before we're open, I find that by not this is a little bit tricky for me to say. I found that being open to people and answering their questions honestly about what herbs can and can't do really settled a lot of people's nerves, especially the other practitioners. So we have to understand, meaning herbalists, that there are some really hokey herbalists out there, and they're often online. So there are some excellent herbalists out there also online. But I mean, have you seen weird herbal stuff, like just making big claims that things can be cured, or tea trees basically, will stop all dental decay and your mouth will be fresh and lovely forever. I mean, it's just, these claims don't hold up. Human health is precarious. We are made of cells that die, and we will die. And in between life and death, we get sick some of the time. Some people get sick very regularly. Others don't get sick as often. Sometimes it's lifestyle, sometimes it's genetic, sometimes it's a combination. But when people make just bold claims about herbs and what they can do, if I'm listening to that, I'm like, that's just not true. Like, I know so many people who take herbs and still have lots of healthcare issues, but their symptoms are often better. So sometimes maybe it's my skill as an herbalist, or maybe they need some other form of treatment. But, all this is coming back to when I was starting to get to know the practitioners and the doctors, particularly when we were setting up, they had a lot of nervousness about working with herbalists. I felt that their nervousness was reasonable because they don't know much about me. I know lots about them. I know all about, all of us know lots about doctors, but they know very little about herbalists. And so this is still how I feel. So like a question, if the person asks the question I'm about to say in an open-ended way, I try to answer it. And that is, why should we use plant-based medicines in the modern world? Why not just use drugs? So I'm sure all of you, this question, you're ready to write lots of chats, you're welcome to, but it's a good question, right? So because it has numerous answers, right? So one of the best answers to why should we even use herbal medicine is so that we have choices, right? So choice in healthcare just gives more possibilities for health. So before we saying it's natural, don't care for that word, or holistic, also weird. I think just like it's nice that we have that there's acupuncturists, massage therapists, psychological counseling, pharmaceuticals. So for me, herbal medicine is, none of these things stand alone. So in a really excellent healthcare system, which I have not seen, if we were in a really excellent healthcare system, one of the things that we would see would be a coordination or an integration of these different healthcare treatments, right? I mean, that would be the thing that would work so well, right? So they might see an herbalist, and I recommend they get tests for the thyroid. The doctor sees them and tests their thyroid. Maybe they also need body work. So we try to do this. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the free clinic. So back to my original point, though, is I think that if we're just honest when people ask questions like, why use herbs? And it's open-ended, like, why use herbs? It's not a question. That's like just when people believe things and they're just going to believe them, right? But sometimes people just like, why bother doing this? And I think there's lots of reasons, but above all, we have choices in healthcare. We're not just stuck in one frame of reference. So it is not even touching on things like greed in the pharmacy industry. but because it's greed in the herb world too, right? I don't want to separate and say like, we are this exclusive thing and we are so much better. We are just another thing and the individuals make it up. So I think I'm way off track with the free clinic. That's a lot of things I think about while working there. So let me discuss some of the services we offer at the Ithaca Free Clinic. This feels like some kind of ad, but I'm going to say it is free. So these, I'm going to mention some of the things that I think we have that are helpful. And the reason I am saying this is I think I'm really glad we have them. And these are ideas if you work in a free clinic or considering. And so we have an insurance facilitator, which is really helpful because many people don't have insurance. And so they come in, somebody from Fidelis, and they come in once a week and then work with our patients. Our patients will come in, I think, on Thursdays, and then see if they can get insurance. And I mean, that person's there from beginning to end of the process, making phone calls. So very helpful. Next, we recently, I think it's the Lions Club, who I don't know that much about. You know, they would fit into like other conspiracy theories, but they actually gave us the money to buy optometry equipment. So we have, I don't know the names of any optometry equipment, but we have like the thing that you put on your eyes and it tells you your vision. And so people can now, once a month, we have an optometrist come in and we have all the equipment set up. We're not doing it now, or just starting to because of COVID. I'll come back to COVID in a little bit. So that's been great. And then they get free classes. So that's amazing. That's new for us. We have a chronic care program, and I want to spend a moment talking about the chronic care program. So I'm not sure if I'll get to it, but you know, I have an idea of what I think my fantasy clinic would look like. And the one thing that we don't have, I would like to have more of, is true integration of the different practitioners, excuse me again, working with different people. So I'm going to explain the chronic care program, and then I'm going to come back to this. So once a month, or before COVID. So many of these things are pre-COVID, but we'll probably come back to all of them. Most people still work there. So we would meet once a month, and we would go over patients who were in the program called the chronic care program. The chronic care program, almost anybody could be enrolled in it. Remember, everything is free, but basically it focused on anxiety and depression, weight issues, cardiovascular issues, lung issues like COPD, and diabetes. So not many people have a number of these. It's common, right? And chronic pain. So once a month, we go over all the people who are in the chronic care program, and it tends to be nurse practitioners, herbalist, nutritionist, and an acupuncturist, and we discuss what we think would be a good way to go forward with it. So that is close to my ideal. So my ideal of a clinic, one of the main things is that we have multiple people working on the same person coming from multiple angles, because that's what the beauty of it is, right? So the doctor's scope. So let's put the doctors in the free clinic in a good light here. They're trying to help people, and so they have a whole training that they look at. An herbalist another training, an acupuncturist another training, and so then we decide like where they should go, who they should go see. But we don't do it regularly. And my ideal would be this would be done more regularly. The problem is time. Right? The problem is everybody has other jobs and we're all volunteers. And so, but I would love to see that more in the clinic where we discuss more patients, but, you know, we try to discuss 15 or so in the course of 2 hours. And, you know, we also just talking because we like each other, we're friends. But that's the chronic care program. So basically they're enrolled in it. They get looked at more regularly. We do things like check so I don't do most of these things, but their vitals are checked, their blood sugar is checked, they're checked in with regularly, what pharmaceuticals they're taking, and then at the meetings that we have, then I'll discuss some of the herbs. But I don't go into details what I give them because there's other herbalists there, but you know, they're going to do what they do, and I'm going to listen to what they give. And I think giving them formulas wouldn't be, telling the other practitioners the formulas wouldn't be helpful. But I would say something like so they're working with somebody who's on, let's say 2 or 3 diabetes drugs like metformin, and their A1Cs are, let's say, 8.6 or something like that. And then we would say, okay, we can, the herbalists, we can see them to help. There's some herbs, as I mentioned, cinnamon and a few other herbs that can lower the numbers down a little bit better for type 2 diabetes. And then maybe the acupuncturist to say, also that person seems really stressed, and when they're stressed, it changes their blood sugar level, so I can use acupuncture in there. So that's an ideal that we're moving towards. It's been a little bit, it's taking a long time to get there. Though really, it's a lot of it is just time, people being there. You have to excuse me, I'm trying to skip over a lot of the notes so I get there. What I wanted to do is I wanted to go over some of the goals that I have for working in a free clinic. And so there's a whole question of like, why do I want to work in a free clinic? Probably the real answer is somehow I have a hole in me and that needs to be filled by helping people. So I like helping people. So we can go into like a deep psychological, but that could just be a Jewish thing. I think it spreads out a little bit further than not just Jews. So, oh, by the way, if you're here, happy Rosh Hashanah, happy, I think, 5781 to everybody, if that means anything to you, but it's the Jewish New Year. And L'Shana Tova to all of you. I just want to say, though, I am like so many Jews, I am so unreligious, but I got the nose and I got the sarcasm. So it makes me Jewish enough, I think. And my mom. So these are some of the reasons that I wanted to be a part of a free clinic. So first one is I want to make herbal medicine more accessible. Herbal medicine is expensive and not always that easy to get and hard to know if you have quality herbs. I mean, all of those things, I'll say them again. It's often inaccessible. It's expensive. It's like $9 for a 1 ounce bottle. So at the moment, I'm not comparing it to drugs, but insurance never covers herbs. And so I've worked for many years in disenfranchised communities. So different BIPOC communities, but it's really it's people who have been disenfranchised through the system. And so often herbal medicine is out of people's reach because they don't have the resources to get herbal medicine. So I want to counter something that somebody might say before it is said. And so there's the idea that anybody can gather their own medicines. And I just want to wipe that idea away because first, many people live in urban areas. So there's that. Next, if you don't have a lot of money, it's not because you're not working, it's because you're trying to make ends meet. So imagine having 2 full-time jobs and now having to learn how to gather plants, do it correctly. You don't want the wrong plant in there, and then take them. That is a skill set. That's like if my car broke down and somebody's like, just fix it yourself, like get a manual and just learn what a carburetor is, right? So I just want to really say that. So if people want to learn about gathering herbs, I run an herb school. I'm glad to share about how to gather herbs and make medicine. But the vast majority of people I see, they're overworked or they have a lot of body pain, and that's going to also stop them. So while herbal medicine for some of us, like myself, the beauty of gathering it is definitely a part of being an herbalist. For many other people, it's out of their reach. And I'm not going to, I would be patronizing in the worst of ways to think that they can gather their own medicines. So I can do that. And then I also have younger people who help me to do that as well. So my personal goal, I'm going to go over more specifics. My personal goal is how do we actually make herbal medicine accessible to the widest variety of people? And so even systems like if you're Canadian or somebody from the UK listening to this, herbal medicine is still inaccessible. So you have way, way, way better healthcare. So I'm not going to go into the details. Well, you know the details. But if you want to see an herbalist in Canada or the UK, you still have to pay out of pocket, right? Because the National Health Services is not providing that. So it's kind of almost universally hard to find an herbalist where, there's some medical system that covers your costs. So a free clinic is what I offer. So just to say, how do I support myself in the free clinic is I run a school. So I'm going to go there and then go back to my goals. So I run the Northeast School of Botanical Medicine. There's a little bit of an ad. If you go to sevensong.com, you'll see my school, lots and lots of free handouts, way too many videos of me talking. But that's how I do it. Basically, I've been very fortunate in my life, privileged to have a school that's been successful enough to be able to afford me working in a clinic. Again, if you're interested in giving donations, you're welcome. But I'm doing okay, right? So that's how I do it. I do it by having a job. I do it by running an herb school. The beauty of that is by running an herb school, I constantly learn, because in order to teach people, you want to not teach the same things over and over again. So it builds my skill level up, and the clinic builds my skill level up, making me a better teacher as well. So back to my goals. So I just want herbal medicine to be available to anybody who wants it. And so accessibility means a number of things. Accessibility means it's easy to get to. So not just inexpensive. So herbal medicine is not just expensive to purchase, right? But often like the language revolving around herbal medicine could be hard to understand for people because it could have a very in language. Words like materia medica and tincture, I don't know, botanical preparations. So accessibility has a big part to do with monetarily, it's free, but also how we approach it, like the language that we use, making our language accessible to people. And then just having a place that's accessible. So the free clinic is in downtown Ithaca. I mean, it's a half a mile walk from like the downtown, but pretty close. There's a bus that goes pretty close to the free clinic. These are primary things. Your location matters, right? People have to get there, and a lot of people don't have access to a vehicle. And so that's another part of it. I have other personal goals from working at the free clinic, aside from accessibility and availability. I want to learn. And so whatever it sounds like, in order to learn how to use herbs better, I need to work with people. So I try not to be cavalier. Cavalier means unthinking about what I do. I'm pretty thoughtful about what I'm working with. Most of my patients are on pharmaceutical medications or on pharmaceuticals. But my goal is I want to learn more, and I want to treat people more, and I want to keep notes better, and I want to start accumulating data about herbs and how they work and who they work for. And so the free clinic is personal investment for me in order to learn more about how to be a good herbalist in these situations, because a lot of the information about herbal medicine is scanty, and the clinical information about herbal medicine is super scanty. I want to say probably the best book on clinical herbal medicine is by Gillian Stansberry. I'll say it again, Gillian Stansberry. They're a little bit expensive. It took her a lot of time to make these books, but they've been coming out. There's about 5 or 6 volumes. You can look at the volumes online. They're sold through a lot of online book retailers. But I think as a clinician, there's some of the most well thought out books on treating specific illnesses and how to approach it, not just give herbs, but why you would use certain herbs. I think that's about it. What I want to do now is cover, if you're an herbalist working in a free clinic, some of the skills that I think are really helpful. They include assessment. So there's words like assessment and diagnosis. In general, I'm not skilled enough to diagnose. So a diagnosis tends to be kind of a medical definition of a health issue. So sometimes probably I do diagnose or make that jump. Like if somebody has alternating diarrhea and constipation and their colonoscopy is clear, then maybe I would say they have IBS. That's kind of a diagnosis. But in general, it's much more of an assessment, meaning that I am just naming their symptoms back to them without it. There's exceptions to that. Would I use the word diagnosis in a specific way? And I use the word assessment in a specific way. Terminology. So I don't think there's any legal thing about me saying diagnosis or not. I just like to use the word properly. If you notice, I use the word patients when I'm alluding to people I work with. Some people have said that the word patients is a protected medical term. That's just not true in any way. There's lots of words you can use. The word that I can't say is I can't say that my herbal medicine there is an apothecary. The word apothecary is a protected medical word in New York State. So, but I don't really call it an apothecary very much. And if I do, it's just the people I'm talking to. But in other words, I can't put a sign in front of the free clinic saying 7 songs apothecary. That would have legal ramifications. So things that are helpful to work in a clinic as an herbalist: assessment skills, of course, clinical experience. It's important. It's hard to get. We'll talk a little bit about it later, maybe. Working well with other practitioners, working well with similar practitioners. Counseling skills are paramount. Counseling is like half of everything. So I'll talk more about this because it's a primary, but you know, we give stuff to people, whether, you know, I give herbs, other people give pharmaceuticals, but so much can matter in the interchange between me and the other person that I'm talking about. That counseling moment, that consultation, that intake, that's a chance where you can offer education, advocacy, agency. You can help people feel better in this process. It does not cure them, right? Their back pain is not gone, but they might have better avenues to explore other care. So what I'm trying to say is that the counseling aspect is a very important aspect, I would say, of healthcare all around, like how you approach the person, language that you use. More to that a little bit later. Other things that could be very helpful. I'm sorry, I just read something from Michelle. Is your dedication. So, you know, if you're going to say I'm going to be a part of a clinic, especially if you're an herbalist that's not a part of a clinic, if you join and then drop out, you make the rest of us look bad. Now, there are reasons to drop out. I mean, things happen in life that make us leave, but that dedication is important. I have loads of that because I'm so glad to be there. I feel so fortunate to be a part of this clinic. Like, I love getting thanked, of course, but when I leave, I think I am so thankful that I can work in this clinic. This brings me to something else about being a part of the free clinic. So one of the things that the free clinic is different is if you're helping start a free clinic, this might come up again later. If you're helping start a free clinic, if you insert yourself in the beginning, then herbal medicine and herbalists are there from the beginning. So what happens, you have a free clinic, and let's say they have acupuncturist and massage therapy. So then you as an herbalist want to join them, but they don't really know what herbalism is or what you do. So I felt like there were 2 herbalists or 3 herbalists in the beginning, that being there from the very beginning and laying a foundation that herbal medicine matters, and we are people that work well with other people, and we have skills that patients want, because lots of people want herbal medicine. That is well drawn out by any statistic you see. Herbal medicine is crazy on the rise, sometimes in good ways, sometimes not so good ways. So getting there in the early stages can be really helpful. So dedication. I would say desire to learn from others is very important. And of course, humility, right? People get worse. Like first, sometimes you get corrected. Somebody says, you know, you could have done that differently. Or something I might forget to do is like ask people about their diet for something that was really obvious. I should have asked about their diet. So you just have to, you know, at first get a little tense, you make mistakes, and then you relax. I'm like, I'm just learning it again. Plus, sometimes you give things that make people feel worse. That's going to happen. Like if you've never made anybody feel worse, you don't practice often enough, right? So sometimes you're going to give somebody feverfew for a headache, and then their headache gets worse from feverfew, because headaches can be very touchy about different flavors and tastes and chemicals in the body. So then you just have to, I'm sorry, we'll try again. If you feel confident, sorry about the headaches getting worse. If you feel confident working with me, they probably do because they're talking to me. Let's try other herbs. You know, what can we do better next time? I would say having a lack, this kind of goes with humility, but having a lack of dogma can be very helpful as the herbalist in a free clinic, just listening to new information come in. Having a really good understanding of physiology and pathophysiology, because that is the language of health, right? So when people describe their health issues, having a good sense of how their body works. So my anatomy is not as strong. Like I can't name the bones in the body, like just a few. But I have a pretty good sense of what herbs do, which is generally herbs work on physiology, how the body functions, not the structures themselves. It's maybe not the best way of saying that, but I have a much better sense of physiology and what goes wrong, pathophysiology. One of the reasons that's really helpful to know physiology and pathophysiology, it's going to go with the next step as well, is because you can help explain information back to your patient. So in our system, the doctors have very little time to talk to patients. So they give some basic information, they might send some information, and then people though don't really have a good understanding about what's going on in their body. And you can say, your thyroid controls basal metabolism. So because your thyroid is not working so well, you're gaining weight in cold because your body's holding on to stuff more, and you can't make as much heat. Your cells aren't active enough to make enough heat. So something very simple like that, like, oh, right, I've always wondered what my thyroid is and why I take thyroid supplements, or why they're depressed from low thyroid, or why their hair breaks easier from low thyroid. This takes me to another step. One of the things that we can do as herbalists and clinics is we can bridge conventional with whatever we say you want to call it, we do, which is just a different conventional, herbal conventional. We'll just call it holistic. So it's common for me. So we'll talk more about educating patients as we go on here. But really importantly, being that bridge. So understanding physiology and pathophysiology, understanding how the body functions and what goes wrong with it, helps me understand what their health issue is. So if they're saying they're having some digestive problem and it happens 20 minutes after they're eating, it's their stomach more likely and not their small intestine, because 20 minutes after you eat, your food's in your stomach. So something very basic and simple like that. So next, understanding drugs and pharmaceuticals. So by drugs, I mean pharmaceuticals or medications. So most of my patients take pharmaceuticals, right? And so I want to help them, and I want, sometimes knowing what medications they take helps me understand what their healthcare problem is. And if they're interested, sometimes we can discuss the various pharmaceuticals. If you want to do this, I found the best way is not studying like every herb for anxiety, because there's a lot of them, and is just working when somebody comes by and it's the first time anybody mentioned Lexapro to me, and then I would just look it up later that day and just learn more about Lexapro or whatever the medication is that they're taking. There's lots of them. I definitely have to type them in and find them often, but I definitely have enough of a basis of the common medications for like the cardiovascular system, the thyroid, diabetes, mental health, that I can discuss it with the patient. To stay in line with this, I think it's really important. My job is not to get anybody off any pharmaceutical. That is, if they want to do that, that is a discussion we can have. It's hopefully a discussion they can have with their medical person, their PCP, primary care physician. But I don't see that as my job. It's not even my desire. Many times pharmaceutical, if you have diabetes and you're not taking your medications and your blood sugar goes up and stays up, that's long-term damage, right? Having a sense of how the body functions and having a sense of different medications and having a sense of different diseases allows us to be bridges. In other words, to help inform our patients, the people that we're working with, to understand what is going on with their body to some extent, how the medical world views what's going wrong with their body, and maybe help them sort out their medications if they're interested. So I think we have the access, we can have the brain power to do all these things, and the caring. Of course, you have to have time set up in your consultation to do this. But it's common for me. The most common part, though, is not talking to people what medications they're taking. Much more commonly, they'll say, I have irritable bowel syndrome, and they don't really know what that means. And I'm saying this is like a problem where your nervous system is overactive in your intestines, and sometimes it's way overactive, you have diarrhea, and sometimes underactive, and you're constipated. So I'm just saying, like, these are common discussions. I don't talk as fast. Hopefully I don't talk as fast to my patients. So those are some ideas. I know people are writing chats. I'm not checking them, unfortunately, because I lose my focus just saying I lose my focus. So we'll keep going. I'm looking at some of the notes on setting up a clinic in the early stage. So I want to go over some of the parts about setting up a clinic in your early stage, setting up a clinic. So I've covered some of these. The two main points I've said are I still feel, which is people are anchored in the community, and we all have a common goal. and that common goal supersedes everything else. We are working towards that common goal, which is free healthcare in this case. So some of the things to consider in the early stages, will you be there? And I would suggest, if at all possible, to be there in the early stages. You also just learn a lot, right? I mean, I've never set up a free clinic, and now I know a lot more about it. And by knowing more about it, I feel more integrated into it, right? Because I understand more basis. And also, I just like learning stuff, and I like learning stuff about healthcare. So when you're working with other people, it's like, what community are you looking to serve, right? So that's a basic question. So you're getting together with people, you're figuring out like you want to help provide free healthcare. Now it's like, who are you hoping to serve, and how do you reach those folks? We didn't really have that much discussion. We wanted to reach everybody who needed it. So on that note, let me just say the difference between who the doctors see and who the holistic practitioner sees. So I'm going to do this artificial divide that we use, so that in our clinic, we'll say who the medical people see and who the holistic people see. That's how we do it. We have a medical director, and then I'm the holistic director. So, so to see a medical person, a doctor, a nurse, or a nurse practitioner, to see a doctor or a nurse practitioner, forget the nurses do vitals and see everybody. You can't have insurance. So that's the final line in our clinic. If it's an emergency, they might be able to see them, but our clinic can't afford, we don't have enough hours to see everybody. And so we made the decision to only see people who are uninsured, who mostly need healthcare the most, though lots and lots and lots of people are, I mean, almost everybody is underinsured, frankly. Also, when you see a doctor, you don't need to have an appointment. So all this is pre-COVID and will be again post-COVID. So I'm just leaving COVID out for the moment. So basically, people just come in the waiting room, sign on, and then the doctor will see them in the order that they came into the waiting room. That's how we do it. It's pretty much, it's not a lot of, like, nobody's coming in that would need to be seen in an emergency room. I mean, if somebody came in, they were bleeding really badly, the doctor would maybe see them, but we would call an ambulance. Or however we get them to the hospital. But people are acutely ill who come in. I mean, that's a scary thing, right? The waiting room is filled with sick people. So, so the doctor sees people in the order they come in without insurance. The holistic people, we see everybody. Holistic healthcare, meaning acupuncture, herbal medicine, massage therapy, we have Reiki, and there's a few other allied arts that come in, skills. They have to have appointments to see us. Excuse me. And the reason they have to have appointments to see us is because we see them for a long period of time. So I work 4 hours a week. And so the maximum I can see, if I see a person every half hour, the maximum I can see is 8 people. So we can't see people just coming in. If somebody just comes in and somebody canceled, which happens all the time, then I can't see them. But in general, all the holistic folks, they have to have appointments, but they can have insurance, since nobody's insurance covers herbal medicine. Some people's insurance do cover things like massage therapy, chiropractor, which sometimes we have as well. So that's a difference. They make appointments and we see anybody. So the people that I see range from college professors to people who, meaning that people with a good salary, it doesn't really matter what they do, people with a good salary to the majority of people with not much salary at all, and also just lacking resources, not just not having a job currently, which is a problem enough, but being marginalized in other ways by society. So going back to this, which is basically some of the early stages. So the early stages, we would see anybody, and then we made the decisions who the holistic people see and who the medical, the conventional people say. They don't say conventional, by the way. So I guess there's also, when you're doing it initially, this is really just goes with anything. It's like, how will you structure your committees? We spent a fair amount of time getting the committees in good structure, and sticking to them actually was really helpful because we, like every organization, burnout was happening pretty quick. And so people just saying, okay, well, stay on this committee and this subcommittee. Usually, all the committees had subcommittees, but that was really important. That structure really helped us out a lot. When you're doing this, you should be really honest with yourself. And I've seen people not be honest with themselves with the next thing I'm about to say, which is how much time can you devote to this? So many people get excited and feel like I'm going to do this, but they still have their other parts of their life that take up time. And so if you're going to join something like this, you have to honestly assess how much time can you really give to this, and then stick to that. So don't join 3 committees when you barely have time for 1 committee. All it does is wreak havoc. People give you details, you can't fill them. You feel guilty about, I'm getting a little personal here, maybe you feel guilty about not carrying out the jobs that you said you would. So I think it's really important that I can do this, I have the skills to do this, and I have the time to do these 3 things. And I'll take those on and accomplish those things. Next is, what finances do you have available? You don't have to necessarily have much money available at all. The free clinics, so I need a lot of finances to do the herbal clinic, but being a part of opening it up, I didn't need much money at all. I mean, I wasn't paying rent or any other finances. I mean, maybe we bought food for each other. So, and then here's something that's going to be a little bit of a stickler. I'm going to open up a window right here. I'll be right back. You just see my shirt over here. It gives me better lighting, and it's sunset. And I'm facing a western window, so I get a little sunset while talking. So here's a really tricky thing. Herbalists are not licensed, right, in the United States. There are qualified herbalists in the UK, so that exists there. But in the United States, there is no legal recognition of herbalists. And that hampers us getting into other places. So there's I give certificates. We all give certificates. I could write, the next person writes in, here's a certificate for you, and now you're a certified herbalist. I mean, a certificate is just a piece of paper. They're very variable. They don't hold a legal status. So when an herbalist is trying to join, now you can be a nurse herbalist or a doctor herbalist or a massage therapist herbalist. So that exists, but the herbalist part is pretty separate. The only exception is acupuncture. You can get a license to practice TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, and that basically gives you a medical and a legal status as an herbalist. So I can't speak much about that because I haven't been involved, but I don't have any of that. And so it's just being honest, like, what's your legal status? Legal status, I'm an individual who knows a lot about something, hopefully knows a lot, and would like to help people. And I also I try to be very safe and when I work with people, but that's what we have to offer. That becomes a hurdle as trying to get into other places, is that licensing. There are so there's the Maryland University that offers a degree in herbal medicine, and there's Bastyr, but they're really just bachelors of science or masters of science. And so it's still not like a license to practice herbal medicine. So let me spend a moment here. So then the big question is, it's a risk, right? So what are the risks in practicing? The biggest risk for me is hurting people. So people sign documents coming to the Ithaca Free Clinic. I don't have them with me, but I can send them. That, it's like your legal document that you sign when you're working with a practitioner. So we have that. I'm not really sure what happens with herbal medicine. I mean, Reiki practitioners are also not licensed, but actually all of our body workers are. Ithaca has a large massage therapy school. And so in my many years of practicing, and it's been a lot of them, it's rarely been a problem for me. I feel like the way that I try to avoid legal problems is not by BSing what I can do and can't do. I don't say more than I feel capable of doing. So it could become problematic if somebody wanted to come after me. that they can do that. But it's the United States. Anybody can come after anybody and sue them. So that's a possibility. I just hope that I'm like a good enough human being. I don't know what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that that doesn't happen to me when I work with people. And so again, we don't have legal recognition. There's a other whole side to that is interesting. Because I don't have a license, I can't practice outside of my scope of practice. So I don't have a scope of practice. So in other words, I can practice in a weird way. I can practice anything, no reasonable. I'm not giving injections to people here. I can practice anything because as a human being without a license, I don't have a scope of practice. When herbal medicine, if that ever becomes legal and has like a certificate that says this is your scope of practice, then actually you have boundaries. So at this point, we have this gray area that we inhabit, says the 62-year-old, is actually in some ways makes it easier, right? Because I'm not going to get in trouble for practicing. I'm not going to get in trouble, for practicing outside of a scope of practice, which I don't have. I don't have a scope of practice. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. Good Samaritan laws are a whole other thing. Every state has their own Good Samaritan laws. They're kind of complicated, and they really don't apply to a person who's not licensed like myself. The Good Samaritan laws are mostly made to protect medical professionals who have a license that could lose their license practicing indiscriminately. So, but you can learn more about that. But that's your Good Sam laws, your Good Samaritan laws. So, but they really differ. I tried reading New York State's. That means I was getting clouded over trying to read all the laws. So next, a little more practical is, you all doing okay? How are you doing? Are you getting some useful information here? Am I talking too much about myself? It seems like I am. Do you think I should get gold rim glasses? Should I stay with the silver? Let me know how you doing there. All right. Yeah. Anybody have some good snacks they can offer? All right. Some positive praise. I love that. So I'm going to keep going. Thank you, by the way. I think it's a great cashews. Yum. I love cashews. Goat cheese and olives. Oh, nice one. Yeah, I'm sorry, Gemma. It is late in the UK. So I've taught. I'm totally going out of character. I'm staying totally in character. But it was fun. I have friends that are qualified herbalists, mostly in England, and I've gone and taught there, and I've really enjoyed myself. I've gone to that garden. What's it called? That has all the poisonous plants. It's in London. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting the name of it. But that was fantastic. I went with an herbalist named Christopher Headley, who unfortunately recently died, but it was amazing going to that garden with him. The Chelsea Physic Garden. If you're an herbalist and you want to go to an amazing herb garden, go to the Chelsea Physic Garden. It's somewhere in London. I don't know where I was. So I went to Kew Gardens, which were amazing, but the Chelsea Physic Garden, that's like for herbalists. All right, sorry about that, everybody. So what I want to do is talk about my herbal setup, like what it looks like for me when I see patients at the clinic. And so this is just how we set it up. So why I'm explaining it, this is how we do it. And so it's just one idea of how to do it. So, so I see patients in an office number 7, not a coincidence. And that's what I've been seeing it. So I'll say this, and then I'll say what we've been doing during COVID. When I'm in the office, there are usually 2 apprentices with me. So as I mentioned, I run an herb school. Then I have numerous students, but I also have apprentices. And so apprentices are people that work with me. Basically, it's a work trade. So they help me out. They were here today. It might be a frost tonight, so they're helping me cover the plants up in the garden. We have them made a bunch of medicines. And so they go to my school, they go to the herb school, but they also work with me directly, and they come to the free clinic. So the reason that I do this is number of reasons. So I'm going to talk about apprentices at the free clinic. So first, I never had that opportunity and really wanted it. I wanted to work clinically with an herbalist to get hands-on clinical skills. And I found it very difficult to find anybody, or pretty much nobody, to do that with. Sometimes at first aid events, I would get an opportunity. But, so I wanted to present that as an opportunity. I've been doing an apprenticeship at my school for 30 years. So the last 14 years, the students have also been coming with me, the apprentices, not the students. The apprentices have been coming with me to the clinic, so they get to learn what it's like to work in a clinic. Mostly it's observational, but there's something that they do that's really helpful. And so we make the medicines for the patient while they're there. So I'm going to describe this in a little bit of detail, but they're going to make the medicines, and it usually takes 2 people to make enough medicines in the amount of time we have allotted for that while they're there. So that's it. Whenever I have a new patient, I let them know that there's 2 students. I just use the word students. There are 2 students in the room. And if that's acceptable, if it's not acceptable, they leave. There's kind of not really a secret signal, but I come in the room and I kind of give a head nod, and then they get up, look relaxed, so it doesn't look like anybody's putting them out, and they leave. Probably it's like, I don't know, 1 out of 30 times. It's pretty uncommon, really. But when I ask people if they're okay with somebody in the room, I'm not just listening to their words, right? Because it's, there's a hierarchy going on here. I'm the practitioner, so I want to make sure they're actually comfortable. And so if they say, yeah, it's fine, and they look uncomfortable, then I'll just ask again. But it is helpful for them to be there to make the medicines and to learn. All right. So we now have electronic records. And so I fill those out. So for, I don't know, 12 years, 13 years, we had paper records. And the one thing I'm learning doing electronic records sounds so old school, electronic. I feel like Devo should be singing about electronic records. So the one thing I'm finding out is why it's so difficult for herbalists to fit into conventional medicine. Because in order for the herbalists, to get our data in the electronic records, just electronic records, that we have to fudge a bunch of other things. Like, so I can put like a traditional status. The person has irritable bowel syndrome. The person has low thyroid. Like, those are easy to put in. But where to put formulas in, we had to basically, the person in charge of that basically just had to set it up so that herbalists we can write what we see. That part's easy. We can write what we see, but what we give people was more difficult. So we're often pigeonholed into it. Like, my assessment of somebody might not be a conventional assessment of their healthcare, right? It might not be the typical diagnosis that's going to show up as a number in the electronic records. So we basically set up a whole section, mostly to say that here's the formula and where is that going to go in there, because I need the formula the next time I see them. So I'm just saying it becomes obvious how insurance companies would have it, because we don't have insurance at the free clinic, but that would be a way that would be sent, and how we just don't fit in really at all. Not yet anyway. So, so that's electronic records. Though on the bright side, or the positive side, once COVID happened, I have records on my computer, right? I have them stashed away in password protected areas. And so I have access to people's records when I don't see them, which I've never had before. And here's something, I think somebody wrote they were a physician previously. Here's a big change. I could never read the doctor's handwriting. So we all share the same files. And there's all these jokes about doctors, and some of them don't hold up to be true. Most of the doctors I know don't golf regularly on Sundays. But I couldn't read almost any of the handwritings. I could read almost everybody else's handwriting. It's like some magical thing that you go to Hogwarts bad handwriting medical school, and all of a sudden you're the only one in the world who can read it. So the electronic records, I can read everybody's what they write, which is really, really good. But also, frankly, it's so much easier. I mean, it's just easier to access them. But the reason I'm mentioning them is when I started using electronic records, I really saw how herbalists don't really fit into the conventional setting. So that was interesting for me. So when I see a new patient, they have an hour consultation. And when I see a previous patient, they have a 30-minute consultation. And what I want to do is spend a little time describing each of these consultations. So the first time we see somebody, well, first I'm going to ask them if they feel comfortable with having other people in the room, the 2 apprentices in there. And so they're they're an hour, and I am a time stickler. Like, I started this class tonight at 6 and I will end it at 8. Eastern time. I'm also that way, you know, the patients, I start and end on time and just say, you can come back later. I'm glad to see you as often as you want, but I don't want to have like a line of people building backwards, you know, unless it's really an emergency somehow. So the first time I see somebody, it's for an hour. During that hour, it's a consultation. We'll talk more about what I'm doing during this time. But collecting information is what I'm doing, discussing things with the patient. And then the last 15 minutes are medicine making. So I could still talk to the patient, but I am not a good multitasker. And so when it's about 15 minutes left, so I write. So when I'm talking to the patient, I'm writing. Then with about 15 minutes left, I'll tell the patient, the person there, give me a moment, I want to discuss something, and I'll talk to Shelby. Shelby has been working with me since January. And say, Shelby, so Shelby has her pad out there. And I'll say, Shelby, I need 4 ounces of Passiflora, Ternera, Rosa glycerite in a 4-ounce bottle. 4 ounces, and then I'll repeat it. I'm not sure if I'm going to repeat what I just said, but one, and then I'll say, like, okay, 1 part Ternera, 2 parts Rosa, 1 part Humulus, whatever the formula is. Then I turn to the patient and I say to them, those are the herbs, because the botanical names sound weird, but in my head, I use all botanical names. I mean, they're much easier for me. So I'll turn to the person, maybe their name's Margaret. I'll say, so Margaret, with that, those are the herbs. And, now Shelby's going to make the medicines. So when I describe it to her, it's going to be the botanical terms, just so the patient feels at ease and knows what's going on. So then I'll say, and Shelby, I need 2 ounces of castor oil with 5 drops of black birch essential oil. And also I need a tea of aloe, and I'll just name herbs. And I'll make sure I name the parts, how many parts to each one, and the size. Then Shelby, I don't know if I have it here, Shelby would take out the calculator and then do its pretty easy math to divide how much of each part. So if it's like 4 ounces and it's 1 part, 2 parts, and 4 parts, you just add the numbers up and divide them and multiply them. I mean, I said that really simply, but it's, so then Shelby will then do it, and then she'll make the medicines. So I'm still sitting there in front of the patient. The room's not very big. So I'm still sitting there in front of the patient. Now Shelby is making the medicine. I'm going to be typing on my computer and using this. So this is my label maker that I use. It only makes black and white labels, but it doesn't use ink. It embosses them. It's a heat signature. But it's really small and easy to fit on my table. I've been using this the whole time. I mean, I've had different versions, but it's a Dymo. You can probably see the information. So this is attached to my computer. And then I make a label for them. I use the software from Dymo, that company, then I save it, which is nice. Now I have saved labels to, so the next time I see them, I don't have to make a new label unless they have a new medicine. So I think this is hard. So I would say like 1/3 of all herbalists, their favorite part is label making, like the artistic aspects of it and creativity. Unfortunately, to me, like, I don't have good handwriting, and I don't know, I like it to look more professional. So this is not the most professional label making apparatus, but pretty good. So, but it's very legible is what it is. So so Shelby's making the medicine. I'm making a label. The patient might ask me questions at that point because they're sitting there. I might just say, Margaret, I apologize, but I'm a terrible multitasker. I'll try to answer your questions as soon as we finish this. So next part, I'll probably discuss either today or next class sometime, but it's really important to have really excellent specific directions how to take herbal medicine, because it's weird, right? So for us, it's common. So there's a whole thought experiment we can talk about later. But for most people, like tinctures, castor oil with black birch in it, tea, so some people relate to it. So let me just discuss, I'm going to jump back and try to come back to this place and just say who I regularly see at the Ithaca Free Clinic. So, and then I'll come, hopefully I can find my place. I think I can see it here. So because I work in the free clinic, about 80% of the patients that I see have never used herbal medicine. So the whole thing is weird. My Discussing things with them is weird. My asking about their bowel habits when they have headaches is weird. The medicines I give them are weird. And then we'll talk about patient compliance, and they taste terrible. Like the vast majority of plants have flavors, and those flavors for many people are not very accommodating. So you may think, yeah, I can drink mugwort and motherwort tea. I can drink mugwort tea too, but I would say it doesn't taste very good. And so, well, I'll discuss this in detail, but it's really important when I'm making the medicine to make sure the patient will take the medicine. So before I make their medicines, I ask a few questions. So I'm bringing myself back one step. So what I said just now is that about 80% of the people I see have never used herbal medicine. About 10% use them regularly, and about 10% occasionally use herbal medicine. So my language has to be very specific, and the directions have to be very clear with the individual to help them feel comfortable with it. So before I give them anything, I'm going to tell them what I'm going to give them because I need feedback. So the most important feedback is going to be with tinctures, right? So it doesn't really matter what is this? Go-to cola. So tinctures have alcohol. And for some people, and we all know some people probably, alcohol is the bane of their life. Alcohol creates a lot of problems for them. So there are two big groups of people that don't take tinctures. One of them is because alcohol is physically bad for them. And the other group is because they have religious or spiritual feelings or reasons not to use them. All acceptable. But I'm really scared about having somebody sober start to drink again. This is a concern in first aid, in the free clinic. So before I make their tincture, I say, I'd like to give you a tincture. Tinctures have alcohol in them because the word tincture is not a well-known word, right? So tinctures have alcohol in them. Is alcohol acceptable for you? So the most common question is, why are you asking me that? Except if they're sober. And then they'll say, no alcohol. So there are people that drink and are still drinking, and then they can take tinctures, right? If you saying, I have a problem with alcohol, but I'm drinking, then tinctures should be fine. But some people are what you call stone cold sober, no alcohol at all. So don't give them tinctures. Don't put it in hot water. It doesn't work. Zero tinctures. If somebody has difficulty with alcohol, so I'm avoiding the word alcoholic just because it pigeonholes the whole group of people. But if people have difficulty with alcohol, avoid alcohol. Don't have it in their house, right? Don't make tinctures. That would be my strong point in this. And also, if they have spiritual or whatever, if they don't want alcohol in their body, whether religious prohibitions or other feelings, I also want to accommodate that. So that's one thing that I say. Most people are fine with alcohol. Many people are kind of glad I think it has alcohol because many people like alcohol. Though you're just taking it, it's a 2-ounce bottle, it's 2 shots of alcohol. And Coca-Cola is actually not terrible tasting. Anyway, don't drink alcohol. Don't drink tinctures as alcohol. The next thing that's really important to discuss is tea. And the reason for that is tea is the most difficult of the herbal medicines to make. And so many people that I see have anxiety. And anxiety has numerous triggers, but often with anxiety, new things can trigger anxiety. So when I say I give people tea, I don't give them tea bags. I give them loose tea. We have a bunch of teas in there. We have a bunch of raw herbs in bags to give people. So I'm going to describe the process of how we do this right now, and then talk about something else. So the first thing I'll say is, will you drink tea? Now, many people love tea. I mean, I think I love tea. I mean, the warmth to it, the ritual of pouring the hot water in there, it's nice. The flavor is sometimes okay. You can try to change the flavor and make it a little better. But for many people, all that is a difficulty. So you start with, do they have heat source and do they have equipment, right? So you take it from the beginning, because some of the people might not live in a home, live in a house, or they might live with other people and don't have access to a kitchen. So all of a sudden, tinctures are off the board, right? Tea. They can't make tea. Next is many people, this is more common, just don't want to make tea because it takes time and energy and you have to clean it up. So again, understandable. So no tea for those folks. frankly, I think often, so there are two groups of people that tend to love tea. Often they come from other places in the world, like almost anywhere, I think, not anywhere, but many places. And they move to the United States, and still tea drinking is still a part of it, not, bulk herb tea drinking. And then a lot of people like herbal types just really love the flavor of tea and like it. So what I'm saying is most people, tea is difficult. So we have brochures on how to make tea, but I want to describe to you how I try to increase the efficiency of make it easier for people to make tea. So the difficulty with making tea is measuring and pouring the equipment and keeping the little bits out of your mouth. So I'm going to describe what I mean by all of that. So first, so you might have heard me if you're in the beginning here, the one thing that I tend to ask as donations are French presses, also called tea presses, especially the quart size that have plastic because glass breaks. So I just, that's a little ad going out there. So because we give away French presses, they're about 20 bucks each. So we get, usually I'll get, I'll have some French presses in there and I'll give it to them. French presses make tea drinking, make bulk herb tea drinking much better for a number of reasons. So I'm going to come back to that. But first I'm going to say how we divide the herb up. So when I give people bulk herb for tea, they get 2 bags. They get so let's say I'm going to give them 4 ounces of tea. What I'll do is I'll have a bag that has 3 ounces of tea and a bag that has 1 ounce of tea, right? The 1 ounce of tea goes to 1 quart of water. So there's exceptions. So what I'm saying for this specific tea, we're going to say 1 ounce to 1 quart, right? You can say 30 grams to 1 liter of water here. And so the reason I have the separate bag, I call it the eyeball bag. Probably someday, I'll probably never change it. And that's so they don't have to weigh out the herbs, because the problem is how much herb to put in a quart or how much herb to put in a cup. And often, like for the craziest reasons, people will say like a tablespoon, but you can get like 2 leaves of goldenrod on a tablespoon. And that's about it, right? So tablespoons don't work at all. And I have to say, I don't really like tea balls at all, because you have to jam so much herb in there to get any medicinal action that it doesn't have good circulation. The water doesn't really make it through there, or the teaspoon with the little closey thing. Then there's not nearly enough plants in there. So now we move to the French press, but I'm going to explain again what I just said. So you get 2 bags. One bag is the bag they're going to initially take the herb out of, and the next bag is the eyeball bag. So I'm going to say to them, this has 1 ounce of herb, and that's going to go into a quart jar. Let's say French press. So when they reach in and take it, they can just measure it against this bag. That's the last bag that they use and put it in there. So it's not exact, but they don't need a scale. They don't need more equipment to measure out the herbs. They can just say, here, this handful is approximately the same amount as this bag. I'm going to put this in the French press. Back to the French press. So the French press does a couple of things really well. The first thing is it makes tea drinking less messy. So the problem with when you put herbs in a jar, I mean, herbalists do it all the time. You see herbalists, we teeth strain our herbs. Are we drinking and the herbs stay in the jar? That's kind of frustrating and annoying for most people. So you can strain it, right? It's not that hard to do. You pour from one thing to the other, but I'm trying to simplify. So the French press, when you press it down, right, all of a sudden, all the herbs are held below the screen, which makes it much cleaner to use. And, ready? And when you press it down, you get more stuff out of the plants, right? Just like if you make tinctures and you have a tincture press, or you make your tincture and you squish it up, and then at the end of your tincture press, while you're squishing it in that jack-like thing, all of a sudden the color of the herb changes that's coming out because more chemicals are getting released from the plant. That's true with the French press too. When you pour it out, it works fine. I mean, you can just put herbs in a jar. But when you plunge it down and there's like an ounce in there, you're actually forcing the herbs down and more stuff comes out, increasing the medicinal effect of the herbs. So I really like French presses. I usually give people quart sizes so I can just standardize it. I like them plastic because just they won't break as easy. And, you know, most teas are not going to leach the plastics. The plastics in most French presses are pretty high quality. If somebody wants it, they could get a glass one. But again, really, it's just for me, it's like working with people that might be traveling with this and they could break. So that is tea. So first, is tea acceptable to the person? Are they willing to make it? And then the cleaning up is easier if they have a French press. So we give those away pretty regularly. So all of that is discussing the first thing when I see people for the first time. I see them for an hour. The last 15 minutes are medicine making. And then a part I started discussing is giving them really explicit directions. These days, I have a number of handouts and brochures that I give people. And so we have a brochure of how to use a compress, how to make tea in a French press, those kinds of things. So they have something to take it home. By the way, all of those are free and on my website, sevensongmyname.com. And then you go to handouts and there's a section on these educational brochures. I do update them. I'm not sure what the older ones look like right now, but you're welcome to use them if you want to, if you find that they're helpful. So there's the ironic laugh. So next is what happens to revisits. So when people come back, they have a half-hour visit. They could have an hour visit. So let's say I see somebody for an hour and we don't cover all the information we want to cover. And there's a lot more to their health, which is common. Then maybe we can schedule for another hour. But generally, the second time they come, it's for a half hour. And when people come for a half hour, when they come and they want refills, we just try to make the refills right away because we only have a half hour and it takes a while to make them. So when somebody schedules, they come back in the room, I start talking to them, and we have now on our computers, I'll say, do you need any refills? And if they say, yes, I need them, then within a pretty short while, we start to make the refills, and then they have them to go with them. I really want everybody as much as possible to have the medicine to take home with them there. So this means that you have to be able to make formulas on the fly, right? So I think initially I spent more time thinking about it. Now I feel usually pretty comfortable making a formula for somebody right away. I want to describe the amounts that we make and give initially. And I think the last 5 minutes, we're not there yet. I'm going to look at some of the notes and see what questions people have, but I'm going to keep talking for now. So the first time I see somebody, we're back to the new patients, I tend to give them very small amounts. And so the French presses are 1 quart, the person who just wrote that, or 1 liter. So when I first see somebody, if they don't have a history of taking herbs, I want to give them smaller amounts to see if their compliance is good, like will they take it? And also to make sure that it's good for them. Like, so if they have allergies and I give them something, it doesn't somehow make their allergies worse, or it works. The medicine helps them. So the first time I see people, I often give them a 1 ounce bottle. So 1 ounce is 30 milliliters, but I'm going to stay mostly in the imperial system here. So the first time I see people, I give them 1 ounce of tincture or more than 1 ounce of tincture. I'm sorry. I give them 1 ounce of tincture. After I give them more than 1 medicine, each one will probably be more than 1 ounce. Now, if the person has a history of taking herbal medicine that I'm working with, then I will raise it. So if I see somebody and clearly they take their herb, I mean, they say it, I feel it, I'll give them larger amounts. But otherwise, usually I just start with a 1 ounce bottle. And the tea is usually just like a couple of ounces itself, so that if they don't like it, there's a couple of reasons why. So number one is I don't want to waste products, right? So I give them away. I'm glad to work in a free clinic. I'm so glad to be a part of this, and I'm glad to help support this. But a lot of people don't come back, and I never really know what happens to the herbs. And I know from just experience with other people, often people don't take the medicines I give them. So I don't want to give a lot of medicines that just sit there and eventually get composted. So that's one reason. And then I mentioned the other reasons. One of them is they might not like it, right? So that recently happened. I gave somebody a 1 ounce bottle of something and they just couldn't get it down. They couldn't dilute it enough. So they're not going to take it. So that's not going to work either. So it's not to be wasteful. So that's basically the kinds of medicines that I give people. So that's the consultation. That's seeing people who I haven't seen before, and people who I have seen. I guess, so there's a lot of questions coming up. Let me go through a couple of these questions and see if I can answer some of them. I'm just gonna start from the top. I'm gonna start from the bottom. Hello from Malloryville, Ontario. There's a lot of questions, sorry. I'm gonna go and answer some of these questions. I think they're quite good. So to Nancy's question, yes, herbs often take weeks or months before they work. So what I'm not looking, that's an excellent question. I'm not looking for them to have dramatic results. I just want to know if they're taking it. So when I'm talking to somebody, I will say to them that this herb might not work for weeks or months, right? But I just want to make sure that you're taking it and that it's acceptable. But what I'm not doing is saying, did it work for you right away? So that's a really good point. And I usually say something depending on how I expect it to work for somebody. So I do treat folks who are pregnant sometimes, and I treat folks who are breastfeeding sometimes. I have midwives that I talk to if I feel unsure. So I feel like there's a bunch of herbs I feel comfortable with, especially with breastfeeding. I feel more uncomfortable when somebody's pregnant because of the chance of losing the baby. If I'm unsure of that, then normally what I'll do is I'll just call up a midwife friend and ask them, because there's a couple of people I know that are midwives that work a lot extensively with herbs, much more their experience is more than mine. I don't want to go over the specific herbs right now. Sorry. Sorry, I will read the question before answering it. Sorry, I haven't been doing that. The question from Haley is, how do I reach people who really need free services? How do you tap into that community in Ithaca? That's the question. The response is we have an outreach coordinator. We had one and didn't have one, but their job is to go into the communities that probably need our help the best. I would say we could do a better job of it. It's not an easy job. So the question is, how do we reach people and let people know? Mostly we do it by word of mouth. We haven't had them in a while, probably 2 years. We used to have fairs set up in some of the communities around here. And then we would go there. I would sit there and just answer people's questions. Sometimes I felt like I'm not a tarot reader, but I feel like I'm sitting there and answering quick questions coming by. Can I see your palm? I really like palms very often. Oh, what do you know? Most of these are pretty easy. So Gemma's question is, am I using drop dosage to make 30 milliliters last? The answer is no. I'm using the dose that I expect them to take. I'll talk about dosage later. That's a long one, but I'm not. They're taking it. So an important thing that we'll discuss in numbers, somehow that's special, in numbers, is how to suss out, how to figure out how much it's going to last a person before their next refill. So that's pretty straightforward. Once you know that a full dropper, so this dropper here, when filled to, so it's not filled to the top, this dropper here is half filled. I don't want to put it over my computer. It's 1 milliliter. So this is a 60 milliliter bottle. I'm sorry, so I'm switching to milliliters, describing liquid medicines. I tend to be imperial with solids and metric with liquids. So if I'm giving somebody 1 dropper full 3 times a day, so a full dropper is 2 milliliters. A 1 ounce or 2 ounce bottle that's filled to the top is 2 milliliters. So if I'm giving somebody 3 full droppers a day, that's 3 times 2, 3 times 2 milliliters each, 6 a day. That will last 5 days, 30 milliliters. So I don't use, if you follow that, it doesn't matter so much. I can cover the math later, but I'm always thinking like, how long will this last? If this person drinks 1 ounce, if I give them 1 ounce to 1 quart of water and they drink a half ounce, if they drink a half quart a day, how many days until their refill? Now they'll ask, I don't make refills for them, but so the answer to your question is, to Gemma's question is, I suggest the full amount, but I also think about like kind of make it last a week or however long it'll be. Colleen asked, do I see a lot of children at the clinic? Unfortunately, I don't. I like working with kids, but we don't see many at the clinic. Many of the doctors don't see kids at the clinic. They feel uncomfortable. They're not pediatricians. And so we don't see many children. I mean, I see some. It's not very common. In first aid, I get to see a lot of kids. More fun that way. All right, so what I'm going to do is, we have 15 minutes, and I'm going to go back to what I was talking about. So thank you for your questions. And so the next thing is, it sounds so simple, but it's storage and dispensing of herbal medicine. So here's the thing every one of you who uses herbal medicine has found out, and that is it takes gargantuan amounts of room for your medicines. Like right here, I don't know if you can see it. So I have a couple of tinctures right over behind me. Like this stuff just takes up room, these gallon jars. The flowers take up some room, but they're beautiful to have around. So where are you going to store your herbs, right? So you can see like the beauty of other forms of medicines that come in pills, because, you know, one bottle, you know, you just have a lot. For us, we have to have lots of stuff, especially dried herbs. They take up so much space. So if you're going to work in a free clinic, you're going to have to know, where are you going to store your backstock? Where are you going to store all your herbs? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'll talk a little bit how we do it. The other thing about storing herbs is that you have other considerations, like plants break down. So like the things that give plants life, heat, water, sunlight, are the things that break them down after you kill them and make medicine, or cut the parts off and make medicine with them, right? So like the plant, while it's living, wants sunlight, wants water, and wants heat to some extent, all those things. When you cut it down, sunlight, heat, and water break them down and make them, many plants, non-usable. Different degrees, like peppermint lasts for years, chaparral lasts for years, but other plants like cherry bark lasts for months at best. So different plants have different shelf lives. So not only do you have to worry about where you're going to store it all, you have to consider the situations of keeping them in generally that cool or just not too hot, dry. I think I said heat. I meant water. So the whole thing is sunlight, water, and whatever else I was talking about. So I'm going to keep going on that. But that breaks them down. Water definitely will hurt a plant once it's gathered for the medicinal characteristics. So where are you going to keep these plants? The answer is, I don't know. So the answer, I can tell what I do. So at the clinic, we have a cabinet. Somebody made this really beautiful cabinet to keep the tinctures. And then we have shelving units. I need to get, my shelving units are falling apart. That we have dried herbs. But it takes a lot of space. Like it's almost my height, the amount of herbs stacked up, because dried herbs just take up a lot of space. And then my backstock is downstairs in my house. So I would say a quarter of my house is just entirely taken up by herbs, by tincture. I mean, in some ways it's beautiful. Everybody who comes here say it smells nice, but it's taking up a lot of space. So this is something you have to consider when you're going to work in a clinic, is where are you going to store it? And also, like, are you going to make the medicines in the clinic, or are you going to make the medicines at your home? If you make the medicines at your home, where are people going to pick them up? Are they going to come to your home? Are you going to bring them to the clinic? So there's lots of ways to do this. And for many people, the storage is a very big problem. And the clinic might not have any storage. So we have one room kind of dedicated, a part of a room really, dedicated to herbs. But that won't be an option for many other people. It also, by the way, just means that my herbs, you know, people could take certain herbs, but it hasn't happened too much, right? Because the rooms are not locked. My room's not locked because there's no papers. Other people use it. You know, I'm one of the people who uses room number 7. So those are some storage considerations and dispensing considerations. Where are you going to make it? Where are you going to deliver it? Where are you going to have backstock? Those are some ideas. So I'm going to so somebody has a pretty long question. I'm going to try to answer it. So Joel asks, I'm going to read the whole question. Generally, it seems like herbalists need an understanding of conventional medicine to know contraindications, etc. Do the conventional doctors try to understand herbal medicine and how it works in order to coordinate integrative care. Like, do conventional doctors ever decide to refer patients to the herbalists? Is that all worked out in the meetings where you talk about 15 patients? Those are a lot of really good questions, Joel. So I'm going to answer them and try to answer the questions by restating the question. So I'm going to say them all again. Well, I'm going to say them in my answer. First, some doctors and some nurse practitioners do recommend the herbalists, or at least recommend me and my fellow herbalist, Cal, at the free clinic. Most of the doctors that you're talking about, most of the doctors at the chronic care, I'm sorry, Joe, I'm going to start one more time. Not many doctors come to the chronic care program where we discuss patients. So there's a nurse practitioner and a nurse, but rarely doctors. So the doctors are not sitting in the chronic care program and learning about what herbal medicine does. Some doctors feel comfortable with herbal medicine. Again, I think partly because they'll ask me questions, I'll give them honest answers, and they feel like I'm not too cavalier and just spouting off stuff. So some of the doctors will occasionally recommend. The most common time a doctor recommends an herbalist, I think at our clinic, is when the patient wants a drug, a pharmaceutical, that the doctor doesn't feel is good for them, and so suggests that they see us so that we can give them something that's not as strong. Antibiotics being a common one for that. So it's not always what the patient wants to hear, right? I mean, the patient wants a medicine, and we don't give pharmaceuticals. The herbalists don't. We give herbs. So, but sometimes I recommend, there are some nurse practitioners in particular in the clinic that recommend herbs somewhat regularly. The other time that doctors and nurse practitioners, those are our two major medical folks there, doing primary care, sometimes they'll recommend people with mental health issues, mostly anxiety. If their patient, it's kind of the opposite. The patient has resistance to taking medication. So the doctor says, do you want to take, whatever SSRI or whatever medication? They're like, I don't know if I want to. Then they'll say, do you want to see an herbalist? So the answer is, doctors sometimes do recommend us. Do doctors learn about the herbal medicine? That's another part of this question. Do doctors learn about it? The answer is, I don't think so. But they don't need to. So what you're saying, Joel, is true. It's in a sense an imbalance. We, the herbalists, need to know about conventional medicine because that's the convention, right? The most common form of medicine by everybody in the United States and many, many parts of the world is pharmaceuticals. So the systems are different, but the medications are often similar, right? Pharmaceuticals is what I mean. So we are the outliers in this system, right? Herbal medicine, while in the past and in some parts of the world it's very popular, it is way, way, way less popular, and it's just the reality of it. So in some ways, I don't really want the doctors to learn too much about herbs because they're going to read something and then they're going to say that, as opposed to an experienced herbalist like myself or Cal, who's been working with it along, to know the subtleties of different plant medicines. So the doctors don't tend to study herbal medicine, but we have to study conventional medicine. We have to study all kinds of conventional stuff. It's living in that world. And I think that answers your questions. Oh, contraindications. So that is a way long discussion. And I'm going to avoid it, Joel, for now. So contraindications are really a very big concern. So by what I mean by that, I think what Joel means by contraindications is herbs interacting in various ways with drugs, which they sometimes do. So I'm going to go back to this because that will take more than the 7 minutes left here. And I'm going to end on something I said. All right. I'm going to look at some of the questions. So Judy just asked, what's the legal coverage? I kind of described the legal coverage. So I'm sorry, I'm going back to the questions. I kind of described the legal coverage. The clinic has coverage. I've read the document. I don't really understand it. It's very simple. I mean, it's not a contract. Well, I guess it is a contract, but I don't really know the ramifications of it. So the legalness of me in the clinic is just the legal of the clinic, right? So we haven't I'm gonna take this back two or three steps. When we started the clinic, there was a question of, should herbalists practice? So this, I'm taking, I think it was Judy's question. I'm taking like 28 steps backwards because I think this will give a little bit of insight. When we first started the clinic, went to all these meetings, the herbalists were at many of these meetings, and then we had a vote. And so why did we have a vote? It's because I'm not licensed, right? And so while people may like me or may not like me, I am this uncommon, I'm this square thing in this round hole, whatever, right? All these different ways of saying less conventional. So we actually had a vote to see if herbalists should be accepted to work there as non-legal entities. I remember it well, so we left the room, of course, but later on I found there were 17 for and 1 against. That doctor, I was kind of sad he left. He was an oncologist, and I really liked him, but he just felt unsafe working with herbalists and the same thing. So it does happen. So the way that, before we had that vote, we looked into how often the free clinics get sued, right? Because that's the consideration. How often will we get sued? And the answer is very rarely. You can imagine why, right? Because free clinics are offering the service. So it could happen. I mean, you could have somebody on your staff that does horrible things. Fortunately, we've not had that. So legally, I'm just in the same boat as everybody else in the clinic because we're all under the same umbrella for legal coverage. One of the biggest expenses, the first number of years working in the clinic, our second or third biggest expense was we had to get doctors' insurance. The doctors would not practice because they didn't, I mean, I can't blame them. They wouldn't practice without insurance. And then New York State, weirdly enough, meaning positively, made a law that said that doctors could be covered by their place of primary employment while they work in the free clinic. So previously that was not a possibility. And then that became like, all of a sudden we saved like, I think it was $26,000 a year because we didn't have to cover the doctors and their insurance. So that was about that. So hello, are some of the questions to ask to see if the patients, so Said asks, Said is a really good herbalist in their own right. They're just a really good herbalist. Sorry about that, in their own right in Massachusetts. What are some of the questions I asked? So I'll probably end on this note, right? So there's a lot of questions that I ask people to see if herbs are working. But mostly, so it's really a lot of asking about individual symptoms. So what are some of the questions? I had a whole other idea in my mind that's kind of flown the coop. So when the patient comes in, first I want to make sure that they really feel like their medicines are working. So you can't really say, be honest with me, because that makes things uncomfortable. It's like when people say, trust me, immediate distrust, right? So I try to put it in the tone of my voice and my body language, which are important things in a consultation, to put the person to say, have these things been working? And then I can look at their chart and ask them specifically. So it says here that you can't sleep because you have a lot of back pain. Do you feel like you're sleeping better? And if they say yes, then I don't want to take credit yet, right? So then I might say to them, is there other things that you're doing? And they're like, well, actually, I've gone on a gluten-free diet, and for some reason, the gluten-free diet makes my back feel better. So when I'm asking people to ascertain if the herbs are helping them, one of the important things to do for that is asking direct questions if possible. Like it says here, you were getting a migraine every 2 weeks. Do you still get migraines approximately 2 weeks? And then if the person says they're getting better, then is it the herbs that are helping them or something else? Because, I mean, what is our goal, right? So let's end with this question. What is our goal as human beings, as healthcare practitioners, to other people? And the answer is really straightforward: to help them, right? My goal is to help them or vote them out of office. So there's a whole other thing, and I'll jump back into this. So my goal is to help them. So I don't want to take, like, if the herb, like the person's like, well, actually, I'm not sure it was the feverfew for my headaches. I think it was my diet. In order to help them, I want to push I want to see, is that really true? Because if it's their diet, then herbs are just like a covering or not the thing that's most necessary for them. So I'm going to end here. I'm going to say thank you, Michelle. Hello, Michelle's family. Thank you for being the people who made Michelle. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you have questions about donations, you can ask me about them. I'll try to do a part 2. I think I probably do 15 parts of it. I said about donations, but also support your local herbalists. There are many herbalists out there that can really help you support. I work in a free clinic, but a lot of herbalists cannot do that. That'd be their primary. So pay your local herbalist, if you have one, to see them and to get medicines. And I think that's so. Again, a happy Jewish New Year, 5781. Happy Rosh Hashanah. And thank you for being here. All right, I'm signing off. Thank you, everybody.